Assalamualaikum. A very good morning to all. Before that, I would like to know either Dr. Madi are already in line.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to start our session a little bit more at exactly 10 o'clock. But before that, let's just pray with Surah Al-Fatihah. Prof, I would like to personally thank you for inviting me as your moderator for today's session. And also I would like to thank you for the Office of Deputy Vice Chancellor Research and University for having me. But before that, let me tell a little bit about our speaker for today. This is Professor Madhya, Associate Professor Technology, Dr. Rusmadiah Anwar is a professor at Faculty of Art and Design, University Technology Mara, Malaysia. He is a professional technologist of MBOT with over 15 years experience in various aspects of ceramics for design, manufacture and material. He became an associate member of IEEE Malaysia and collaborators member for the IAC and Geneva since 2011. His research interests are practice-based, laboratory-based, and protocol analysis design research. Most of his research was supported by the government grant awarded by Malaysian government. Now he's currently positioned as director at the National Design Center, and he's also my boss actually. Without ado, this webinar session are for you, Doctor.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Wan Samyati. First of all, I would like to thank the office of our TNC, Research and Innovation, inviting me to give or maybe to share some experience, what has been done or what has been practiced during my journey as maybe academician, and probably I can say like research practice. All right. Today I would like to share about design practice as research. There's a lot of debate, argument, or any discussion about design practice as a research. Can we consider design practice as a research, or does this design practice doesn't have any involvement in research? Before we go through this sharing session and discuss further, I would like to show you. Don't just ignore the profile picture. This is the performance of what has been done since I think 2010. There's a lot of challenges in what we call like showing the possibility of design practice as a research. I've been learned from other researchers, especially on science basis of research, and from that how I learned to migrate the understanding into our practice, because we always tell a lot of our colleagues, researchers out there, that we are practice designer, and we know we can able to analyze, we're able to discuss, we are able to do an exploration in research. But when we want to translate into research practice, we need to make it clear that somebody will read our design practices. And if we didn't able to migrate our style of research in design, it's hard for other party to understand what actually been practiced or been discussed among this design researcher, especially in creative research. Right? We can see that of course it is hard for us to migrate our practices, which is visual design practice, into writing approach or writing, investigating, or whatever been established as a research practice. But if we can have certain understanding about the barrier, the limitation in highlighting our research into our practice, into a research, I believe we can secure the same language of what been declared as research. In Malaysia, the government, the kementerian the ministry always encourage us to go for research, but there is what they call like the barrier or the group of interpretation of the research. We can have different opinion about the research, but if we go to see the practice that's been highlighted by the ministry, what the government encourages, the same language with other discipline. So we need to make it clear that our research, we just need to migrate or translate into this direction, align with the ministry and the agenda of the research practice. So if we're able to translate and migrate the language of our design practice, I believe we can perform as what been asked by the agenda. All right. So this is the performance, the development based on my journey as researcher. But I never work alone. I always refer to any other parties, discipline to learn, to write, and sometimes even until today, my proposal, even my papers, keep on getting been rejected in certain reviewers. So of course we need to have some understanding about the language that where we want to put our research. So let's have some overview about design practice as a research activity. We go to research activity when we observe, see, or being discussed by the scientific research. They are very clear in terms of the systematic research investigation, the flow, the equipment, the methodology, the way how they do the experiment. They manage to do it systematically in a way of the growth of the research. This is how the scientific research done, because the understanding about research is about, can somebody replicate the same output, the same outcome that been discovered by the researchers. So the step, the flow, one by one, being discussed accurately and precisely. It's different with design research. From this visual, we can see the differences flow or the differences process of design research. It's hard for us or other party, especially maybe us maybe all of us in design research, we know when we can understand the growth and the development of this research. We know where is the stage that we start the idea and then we analyze and then we come up with a concrete idea to develop the form. But for other party to make them clearly understand the design research and the process, the activity inside the design, it's impossible, and sometimes it's like abstract. They don't know where did this research start from and the end of the study. Only the design researcher with the language and understanding knowledge on design process can understand. But all this research activity has been characterized by Sean in 1987. He said about design practice. What is design practice is all about? It's all about conversation with the situation in which the designer embodied their idea, some representational medium, reflect on them or modify them. It's a process. There's no such thing that the design research have no flow. But in our nature, in our language, we cannot simply change the process of design development into a scientific research. But so we have to understand the interpretation of research and the interpretation of the process. Let's see the systematic research process in scientific discipline. When we see the flow, the process, how they grow, and then they finally come to the conclusion of their research. It's like systematic investigation with the growth from the research gap until they develop to analyze the result and jump into conclusion. But for the creative designer, this is what happened. We said there's a lot of study being done at the early stage of the research, but there's no flow. We said we can easily say we can have a concrete idea. Suddenly we have a concrete idea, but the issue here is for other researchers to replicate our research is very hard because we only the initial researcher understand the process. But in research context, somebody need to be able to replicate and to clear what is the starting point of your research when you want to go and jump into your conclusion. But it doesn't mean that this process is wrong, because this is how the creative process of the design happen in the situation. We have a research part, and then we go into the semi-concrete level, into the conceptual stage, and then we jump into the conclusion, which is the design. So there is nothing wrong about this process, but it's like there's a lot of hidden process within the activity. So
sorry, Prof. Sorry, your slide has been moved. Can you please represent back your slide, Prof?
Me?
Yeah, your slide. Can you be display back?
Remove.
Yeah, it's been removed because of the participant have been cancelled. Can you please check back the slide? Yeah. Presented now, Prof. Okay,
right.
Thank you, Prof. Sorry.
It's okay. Okay, so this is the stage that we believe that creative people they have their own style of doing research. But now, how can we migrate this creative process into the research activity or research interpretation? So this is the clear picture of how designers do their research, right? How they think. But the consistency of the flow, the growth of the research is, we can say, if we use this model as the explanation, it starts from empathize, define, and do ideation, develop the prototype, and testing. This is the general process of thinking. But for designers, for the creative people, it is hard for them for us, it's not them. It is hard for us to make it clear definition of the process as similar as scientific research. With the scientific research, if they're able to find the gap and then they develop the research design until they do the experiment to jump to the conclusion, the flow is consistent. But for design process, we are not able to use the same stage, but the structure of our research same. We have a consistency of research growth. So, but the process, the activity is different. Sometimes we already gone and we already conclude the prototype, but suddenly within the construction of the prototype, we come back to the stage of ideation within the prototype process. So in research, there will be a question: why you have found the result, and then you construct the prototype, and suddenly you have another idea. But this is the nature of design practice, the nature of our culture in doing a research. We don't have to change this creative process, because if we change the creative process, the limitation of our creativity will limit. So we just make sure that whatever that been decided during the decision making a prototype, when you say there is an idea, or maybe we said we jump back into the early stage, to put and empathize into our prototype, we just segregate that process into the early stage. There's nothing wrong, because in design practice, in design thinking process, where the lots of research design done, we cannot simply migrate our activity like science people or technical people done the research. So the research activity remain as what been practiced before, but we need to segregate the discussion. We cannot combine the same discussion. For example, we do the prototype and then say there is another gap we found. If you say that there is another gap you found, you need to come back from the early, maybe from the stage of definition, defining your research. So we have that structured, what they call structured research investigation. But the research activity, this is the meaning about this stage. How the research design or the creative researchers done their research. This is what happened. Right? But yet we have that stage by stage. So we have a similar process in terms of research. And this is how Nigel Cross defined the way people or researchers do their research. For science discipline, the study is more towards the natural world, and the method used always in the control experiment have some classification and analysis, because the value of the research is more toward concern for the truth. This is how the sciences research always discover. But for the humanities, they also have a scope of study to be discovered, which is human experience. But most of the method that they use is analogy, metaphor, criticism, and evaluation in their analysis of processes. Because the concern of this discipline is concern for the justice. So this is the way how the humanities discipline do research. So there is a similarity between science and humanity. Perhaps the design, we have the same understanding as well, where most of the design researchers study the practice design is the artificial world. It's all about what they call like something that did not exist. It's like a dream. There's a lot of dream in design. It's not hayalan. It's not wahyu. It's the dream, and sometimes it doesn't exist in the real world. But the method, there's a lot of design researchers develop their method by using the concept of modeling, formation of pattern, and do the synthesis. Because the concern of this design research is more to the appropriateness. So this is the similarity, but the contrast between science, humanity, and design. So in now today's research, it doesn't mean that when you do a design research, humanity or science research, it doesn't mean that you cannot cross into other study. There's a lot of research nowadays. Even Creswell defined that after 2000, most of the researchers like to go to do a cross-discipline research. The science, they try to study about human experience, and then they go to evaluate the metaphor between that human experience. Even the designers, sometimes they go to the real world and natural world to jump into the discipline of the science study, because they want to understand the technical part of the design process. So this is the possible research in design practice that we can cross over. Okay, we need to understand the design model that been debated, discussed in research, especially when we involve with design. Frailing has introduced or has elaborated the research when it's come to design. when a researcher try to do a kind of research into design, actually it's drive the research content into design history. But when the researchers derive their research for design, it's actually the research will grow into the modeling the industrial method or maybe the art method in the research. So when the researcher try to discover the research through design, it's actually they are doing a research through praxis. So this is the design practice is all about. It doesn't mean that when we do a design, when we do very practice visualizing the process of designing, we cannot migrate into a research. But we need to understand the terminology or the model that discussed or agreed by a lot of researchers. Even Archer in 1981 said, what is design research is about? It's a systematic inquiry. So, yeah, it's a systematic inquiry. So we need to understand that systematic inquiry goes to the scientific research. It's about the process of investigation. But our intention is the knowledge of embodiment, especially how the man-made things create a product, design, or a system. And it's been defined by Cross that whatever design research been done by the design researchers, it's towards either design epistemology, design praxeology, or design phenomenology. So the consistency of these scholars talk about design research, it clearly shows that we done the design process and the creative process. But segregation of the process and how we discuss, it's important to make other party to understand what we are going to discuss or discover or research. So let's go to terminology. There's a lot of terminology being used in art and design, especially. And the terminology, if we search into either Google Scholar, the search engine Google Scholar or even WOS, formerly known as I. Thompson, there's a lot of terminology being used by a researcher to expand, to explain about their research. Can we consider all this terminology as a design practice? Yes, of course, it's a part of investigation of design practice. They just coin out the terminology. But can we know what actually they investigate when they say they are doing a research-informed practice or evidence-based practice to do best practice? What is the terminology is all about? So, Forman, he segregate the terminology into three areas. When some people or some researchers, they do a kind of example for doing a research for judgment, doing some intuitives, and involved with the synthetic of their study. So the context of the research is more towards design practice. It's contrast with when some researchers trying to grow into a philosophy area of their research, they try to investigate the explanation, the truth, the logic, the knowledge of the design or the art. And when they go into the criticize the art, the humanities, the possibility of ideal translate to provoke and to do some experiment, is more towards design exploration. So that terminology has been segregated into this interaction design research triangle, just to make us clear when we want to do a research, when we discuss about real judgment and intuitive, even particular certain clients change. It's all about, we are talking about design practice. So it is hard for you to explore the logic into this design practice. It doesn't mean that it's impossible, but it's hard. And if this process you try to combine, might be only the researchers understand, or you as a researcher understand the content of your research. So we need to segregate within this understanding of the terminology into a context of your research. So if we understand the context of our research, then this is the model that you can maybe as an example for us, how can we map the design research into categories? The terminology been used before, and then the context of your research been put into your perspective, then you can clarify that the design research category in which part, either the clinical, which is research pro design, or you may be going towards the basic understanding, which is the theoretical part, which is research about the design, or you may be going to the general part of your research into applied research through design. But we can see how they segregate the terminology to influence the activity inside of the research. So to categorize the terminology being used, there is 3 parts of category we can generalize in our research, design practice especially. Research involved with practice. This is the context and the purpose. The critical inquiry and the practice by reflection or research. So this is the process of research that involved in design practice, but divide into 3 categories. Research involved with practice, the critical inquiry, that what we try to discover, and what is the what they call like the method or strategy in design that we want to put. Okay, how the design in our practice, how this practice can move into a research. This is an example. All right, when we read a literature, all of us always read a literature, and they say, okay, I've read a literature, but it's hard for us to understand what actually the researchers explain about. They talk about what. If you didn't understood the context of the research before that we discussed before, it's hard for you to understand what is what actually these papers discuss and discover about. Because there's a lot of terminology being used, there's a lot of inquiry put inside their research, but they have their own context. So we need to make clear the literature is within our context. And we also have to control this paper is within the same context. We can easily clarify the research is within the context by do some study on where did they refer on the scholar before, the scholar that they refer for their research. So we know that this papers is in the same context as what we trying to find. Sometimes when we read this research, and then sometimes we found a gap, and then that gap it's consistent in this example, these three papers. So it's easier for us that there is the consistency gap that we need to find out, because they have jumped into that gap and might be they're able to close within the limitation of their research, but not the full gap of the research has been covered. So we found the gap and then we bring into our context. This is how we read the literature. And when you want to do your research framework from that literature, and then you want to develop your research methodology or research framework, this is an example when the design research try to study about the human experience. Maybe we said we put this the respondent is a designers or the artist, but we're trying to use a control experiment classification to analyze the human experience, because we want to understand the subjectivity, imagination, commitment, and the concern for justice in that designer. This is an example. Some of the researchers say it is impossible for design researchers to study about human experience, but there's a lot of paper journals talk about and explore within that context to make our research cross-discipline. All right. So when we develop a research proposal, of course, any research we need a proposal to control, to limit, to focus, to make sure that we are within the frame. But the most important, when we have the problem, we need also we have to have the question derived from the problem and do the objective, the main objective to answer the question and develop the research design. But in the problem issues, actually we find the gap. We need to find the gap. And when we found the gap, we develop a question. This question will influence the research methodology. Either we go for qualitative, quantitative, or mixed method. That's all. But the objective when we try to answer the research question in our objective, it actually influence the method of the methodology. The method of the methodology is a part, sub-element component when we want to grow the methodology. So the most important of the research design is all about the strategy. So if we put design practice in the middle of our research, we know that there is some element we need to understand that it will involve the design development, product as the artifact, and the designer will be the respondent, and we believe the designer will do the design activity. So based on that framework, we can use example just to calibrate our research, that where did our research going through, or maybe the proposal should going through. For example, okay, we know that from the framework, from our literature, the gap that we found, it's towards research for design. So it's like an inductive reasoning. But the outcome of this research is towards finding the theory, because we try to find the judgment and the intuitive between the designers. But we can see the process of the activity, the methodology within this context. It's activity-based research, maybe it's action research by project, but yet it's a practice-led research, considered practice-led research, and that research to enable the design into design-oriented research. Right? But by the end of this research, when we explore the finding, we actually try to come up with the theory. This is an example. So when we design the research, the flow, this is the conventional way when we want to go to our expanding our research activity. We have a flow chart, etc., and to show the tools. Yes, this is the agreed way of growing the research methodology. But might be for design practices, we visualize our method, the design research methodology, into some visual of flow. But the most important when we develop our research methodology, the first is method and tool should be clarified and declared in our flow of our research. And we also need an evaluation plan for our research. This is the example if we want to do, or we want to limit the scope of our research and what actually we have to do in our research and what actually we want to evaluate for our analysis to come into a conclusion. So this is an example, such a structure based on the same design. Researcher try to understand the human experience and put the designers, and then we use a control experiment to see how the designers do or develop the design or the product. Let's see the experiment. Okay, this is an example of the data collection in design practice. All right? We are not the designers who do the design. The respondent do a design representing focus on design practice. But since this context is to see or to observe the comparison between the students who actually just graduated from their degrees and the novice designer, an example. So by having the activity of the design, but the context we put into to understand how the designers develop the product in several phases. So when we structurally limit or focus our method, all this methodology or the method, the strategy within this control experiment. All the data, the process, the observation process, the data that we gather in our research, and the finding, it's all depend on this control experiment. So, summary, design practice as research. All right, as summary, okay, the most important when we analyze the use of practice in research according to the different stage is about 3 different criteria. We need to have that objectivity, reliability, and validity. And the most important in this sharing session, using practice within research with regard to problem, posing a question, problem for investigation. Practice is the main point, but you need to put the context. Practice can be put in the context, but if we remember the 3 different contexts, the triangle integration, either design practice, design exploration, and design theory, right? And put the practice as a method and way of investigation to gain the new knowledge and understanding. Yet we put a practice into a method, and the outcome, the practice as provide illustration or demonstrative evidence to underpin the any claims and finding. For that, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prof. If any question, you can always ask in the chat room or just directly ask for Prof. But before that, can I ask Prof about, since my background is from fine art, is it possible to use the same model as art practice and also design practice? Is it possible to use the same method or model that is being used by yours?
I believe that this model, if we go back to this explanation about research, Christopher Freiling, I think it came from Royal College of Art, and the background is the art base. There's no issue about practicing or using the background, the experience of art into this model, because we just need to understand the terminology that been used in the background of art. But this model is, or any model here, is actually practical in any researcher, either the science people or the creative people, because in now when people do exploration in their research investigation, there's I think if we limit our discipline into our research, the most difficult task is to make other party or reader to understand the language of our background. That's why if we do a research in our own discipline, it's easier for us to understand and to accept, yes, that is the way how you do a research. But we always have some difficulties when we want to go into other discipline, to make other readers to clearly understand the design practice is actually the strong element. There's a strong element to expand as a research. So if you as as an art base or any arts background, we are considered as we in the field of art and humanities. So the same model can be applied and can be used. And I believe there's a lot of previous research in art practices. If we refer to this finding, there's a lot of art people can able to even publish at the difficult task for us to publish at any Scopus or WS platform. So there's I think that is my opinion on the capability of art becoming research. And if we realize there's a lot of art researcher background, they put themselves into humanities umbrella, and then they discuss, they grow, they try to develop and grow their research into that particular discussion.
Prof, some of the participants asked if it's possible to have your slide.
Yeah, this slide is belong to the God.
Okay.
The knowledge is belong to the God.
Okay, Prof, I got a personal message from Dr. Mumtaz. She asked, how
Dr. Mumtaz,
message me.
my partner.
He asked, how designer or our AD students should talent artificial intelligence ability? For example, like Sophia, the robot that can be drawn. How designer or our student can be challenged the artificial intelligence ability.
Okay, the what they call like the best thing about Sophia, the artificial intelligence, the smart way of doing a research, of course, that is what the world needs. But the system or the artificial intelligence, they are moved by the what they call like data. There's a lot of data being absorbed into that artificial intelligence, and then they're able to respond when respondent or people ask this robot, and based on that question, they can react and answer. So in design, we as a designer, how can we easily jump into that area? But we can say when we at this stage, especially in our context, it's hard for us to suddenly understand the algorithm, the system being used by that artificial intelligence. And then when we want to jump into that research, we will kill ourselves. And there is no idea at all design involvement in that particular field. But when we use the Sophia, the response of the Sophia into our design research, we are what we call like the best researcher in terms of visual. So our study, we just use this Sophia as a subject to explore, is it possible that this Sophia will accept in our culture? So when this Sophia, we said, okay, it's successfully been designed to respond to any human need, because he can help us to giving an answer to support our life. But can this robot accept it in our context? So that is the gap that we need to bring into our local context, because there's also limitation in our context when we talk about robot, especially in our culture, in our religion. So what kind of accepted artificial robot in our local context that can be accepted and can be applied to be used? So the design researcher will apply and will try to find the gap, that how to make sure this robot can be accepted with our society. If we see, there's a lot of researchers claim that Japan, Europe, the European country, the Western country accept robot. But I think there is no study been done in our context. The easiest job for us to do the research is put this robotic, artificial, don't go into the exploration of how the robot been developed, but the surface, the shell of the structure is designed by design researcher. So what kind of visual appearance that required or maybe can balance up the final design that can be accepted by the local context of the culture of of our region. So the visual designer, first of all, they have to put the context of their research into what area first. Either you want to put the robot as a design practice to understand how people create the robot, how designer try to develop the robot to be accepted into our context, or do we want just to explore that this robot we redesign to be with the character of our region. So by putting the context of our research, we have a possibility that we bring that research area into our area. But of course, our specialization is the visual appearance. If you want to jump into how to set the algorithm, the system, it's mean like the science people try to draw. They will fail in drawing. But the design researchers also will fail into the context of developing the research. But if we can able to integrate, for example, there is a gap between developing a certain party into developing a research. We said there is a lot of party involved when they want to construct a robot. So the designers always been claimed as a bridge of the language. So can we set up a platform that all the data from other researchers integrate into the design platform? You just give or transfer the data into this platform, and this platform will construct the language or the data that you transfer, and then it's become a form or a design. So of course we need to have some expertise to develop that platform. So yeah, that is our contribution and our involvement. But not to create or to develop the robot. I believe we will need another 30 years to educate ourselves to understand the development of the robot.
Okay, Prof. There's a question from Associate Professor Dr. Rafiha. She asked, understanding the nature of practice and how to improve and bring forward our academician in Faculty of Art and Design.
Oh, so this is about Faculty of Art and Design.
Yeah.
There's a lot of research possibility. I have experience with a lot of my colleagues as well. When they said we only can draw, we know that is the reason the language that they use. This one. They're able to analyze, to develop, and then to create a design, but only that artists and that designers understand the process. But let's see the different nature of other disciplines. How can the product be innovated? How can this design can be innovated? Because the last stage of innovation and finding has been explained clearly. So for our practice, especially in creative people, we need to make it clear this stage, how we develop that artwork. Because the way we develop that artwork is using the non-linear process. This is the most significant process in our nature that we have to tell other disciplines. We are not an artist without a professional systematic investigation. So to bring our academician, especially, if we want to start our research, explain the process, how you create your artwork. Of course, you need this you have this segregation. You have emphasize, define, idea, prototype, testing. Maybe we can change the term, but the most important is this linear process. So we can start here. How actually the artist and designer think, how they create the artwork. When we say how they create an artwork, even though there is a research maybe said, oh, it's biased because they do by their own. But we are not talking about the biasness. We are talking about the processes. To confirm there is no biasness, we just need to calibrate with other parties. Does this process consistent with other respondents? That's all, if we want to talk about the validity. But the significant practice in our research academician, we can start here. We said, okay, let's do some storytelling about our process of our creating the artwork or the design, because the process for individual is different. But I believe the stage, the phases, same. But this is not the standard. A designer or artist, we are anti-standard. But any academician, researchers in art practice, design practice, even though we all of us have our own individual process in creating an artwork and design, but if we do some segmentation of the process, where did this structure, especially we said, oh, I'm not using this structure, I start with prototype. When you start to develop a prototype, where did you start your idea? They said, no, I just have to test because I have that experience. Because you have that experience, so you can easily do the prototype. Yes. Can you start from how you get the initial idea? That's why when artist or designer discuss about their design process, this is what happened. This is what happened during the research. It doesn't mean that there is no research, there is no analysis, then there is no development. Yes, but this is the stage that only the researcher know how to develop. So that's why it's hard for us to replicate other artists. It's hard for us to replicate other designers. They grow with their own strength. But in research, somebody want to learn something from your experience as a knowledge. So this is the discipline, the area, or maybe the context that we have to expand to make our researchers, our designers, artists to translate into scientific model. It doesn't mean that we want to change our nature. Don't change your nature. We have our own strength nature, but we are academicians. When we said we are academicians, the only thing that we have to sustain, remain, and keep in this university is keeping the knowledge for the future. You have that knowledge, but somehow, someday, we will retire. What else that we left into this university? It's only a knowledge. So when we say a knowledge, if you put your design, if you put your painting, that happened to Mona Lisa. You need somebody to study what actually this Leonardo da Vinci think, or what he tried to explain about the technical, about the material, about the philosophy, about the understanding behind that portrait. Just about the portrait. But the portrait cannot grow. We just do as a research to investigate about the way Leonardo da Vinci think, or the way how he migrate from the philosophy into a science, but the portrait remain. Then that is the strength of that portrait, similar to us. So we as an academician or researcher, why don't we explain that if we are Leonardo da Vinci, we put, and then we explain what actually I explore. Because why? Because we said it doesn't mean that we want to create another Leonardo da Vinci, we want to create another Mona Lisa. That is not our nature, because if you have a lot of painting of Mona Lisa, if you have a lot of artists like Leonardo da Vinci, that is mass production. There's no value. It's a market driven value. But in our research, in our academician, we said we need you to conserve that knowledge to us, because I need to learn something, and we want to tell somebody else in other discipline that this is how we think, this is how we do a research. Yes, we need and we have that systematic research investigation, but it's a non-linear process. But the way we think is consistently same with other disciplines, grow the research. Okay, let's start from here. I believe if we start from here, and I also believe there's a lot of my colleagues starting point of the discussion is start from here. Yeah, I think that is my opinion or my response on that Rafia's question.
Okay, Prof, since we are in the same topic, I think it's going to be a sensitive question for me. Is it possible to have a practice base in your ITM, say for art and design?
Oh, if you ask about the practice base, I can 100% agree that we need that practice base. But did you consider practice base is a research methodology or is a terminology? Because why? Because if you put practice base as terminology, it's different if you put practice base as a research method. Because I believe practice base is a part of research methodology. And if we want to expand and use the only model that we want to use in our research or art design methodology, it will limit the expansion of our research exploration. It doesn't say that is my personal opinion, but I base on what has been done by those people that agree about terminology, practice-based, practice-led, practice-oriented, research-oriented. It's actually, in this context, it's same. But how you drive the research into design, the research for design, or the research through design into design epistemology or art epistemology, design of art, praxeology, and design phenomenology or art phenomenology. That's all. Because the practice base is put into a part of the way how they want to explore the research. You might be say the practice base is a kind of research methodology. I agree. Yes, it's a part. But how about the other method that we can use? We say that design oriented research, the practice led research. We have a lot of method. If you limit that method into a research methodology, so we will limit the expansion of our research. It might be possible used by me. I love to use practice-based, and I'm able to grow with that practice-based. Or maybe I said, no, I combine. Sometimes I use practice-based, sometimes I use research-based. I believe this is not a sensitive issue. It's about the understanding of where should we put our understanding about the method. That's why it is hard for us to expand our research when we didn't clarify this area. We always say when you develop a research question, researchers always try to determine that research question. Either they go for qualitative, quantitative, or mixed method. I'm quoting Michael Quinn Patton, Oppenheim, John W. Creswell. This is the methodology. But when you want to grow your research, it's depend on your objective. And this objective will expand the qualitative methodology into what kind of method that you want to put in that qualitative methodology. So if you put a control experiment in your research area, but and then the question is more toward qualitative, but the wrong instrument being applied, the wrong strategy or tools being applied to evaluate the data, it will come to a error. Because we said error because it will never answering the question. It doesn't mean that your research is wrong. The research is all about strategy to complete and to close the gap. If we want to put as a debate, we can have a conference and debate. It's always a debate. But this is what I mean when we want to migrate our language into a research practice. If we say practice-based is the only research methodology in our field, I can say it's okay if we, in this big faculty, able to prove that this practice-based is a part of research methodology. But there is a lot of scholars doesn't mention about practice-based as a research methodology, but it's a part of research methodology, which is the strategy of answering the question. All right. So if we want to put similar into research methodology, we need to clarify the understanding of qualitative, quantitative, mixed method, practice-based. I think there is a lot of debate we need and a study. It doesn't mean that it's right or wrong. It's about how do you want to make it clear. It's not kesetaraan. It's like the similarity. Qualitative, there is an approach. Quantitative, there is an approach. But in research, sometimes we mix 70-30, 50-50 about qualitative and quantitative. But when we develop our research objective to answer the question, that's how the research methods come. The research method, for example, if we say how the designers develop a product. So the objective is designed to answer that question. So if we said how, it's clearly said is qualitative method. There is no comparison between two variables. If there is a comparison to investigate within two variables, so you have to go to quantitative. So I in my point of view, if we keep or if we want to debate on practice-based, I will suggest that that is a never-ending story, because I always put the understanding of research consistent with other discipline like this. This is the most important part, so that every discipline understand that we have our own study, we use our own method, and we have our conclusion, the value of our research. But, or maybe perhaps, you can cross into other disciplines, how they study. So we need to understand how they study. But in this research, from Freiling to Usher, even to Cross, they said this is the similarity, but the contrast between two different fields. So to answer that question, I didn't say that we need to make practice-based as research methodology, but it's a part of our research strategy, the method.
Okay, Prof. Now it's already 11:05 morning. I think for the slide, can always email from Prof. They're asking. I think can they email Prof personally to have your slide? I think. Is it better to have
Dr. Wan Samyati, email. Just leave an email. I think I will try to communicate with Dr. Wan or Secretariat to give the slide. Who will distribute the slide?
Yeah. Okay. In the chat room, there's the link for the jam latihan. Can always go for the website there. For the people who ask for the slide can always, they're going to email, and please provide the email for them. And thank you, Prof, for the webinar session for today. And I personally thank you for inviting me as your moderator, since we already have history from INSM back there. But thank you again, Prof, and thank you for all the participants to have. We reached around 2,247, 50 people participant today morning. Thank you again, Prof.
Thank you for me, for Secretariat, the Deputy Vice Chancellor's Office, Research, Innovation, and Secretariat, and as well as Dr. Wan Samiti. I try to maybe share with you the slide, and then you might distribute the slide for other, or for everybody.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so Prof, thank you again. We're going to close our session by surah for us, and thank you again all.